Here is some sex news. We are now roughly 4 years into the signing of Sesta-Fosta by Donald can't-even-do-a-coup-right Trump. If you recall, sex workers had claimed that the new law would make their jobs considerably worse. And this just in, they were correct. According to one survey, getting rid of online-based sex work has created an increase in economic instability for 72% of the sex workers polled. It also caused a near 34% increase in reported violence from clients, which is exactly what we feared would happen. Of the online platforms that do still exist, sex workers have reported a drastic rise in prices for advertising due to the fact that they now hold a monopoly on the market thanks to Sesta-Fosta eliminating the smaller sites that couldn't deal with the new restrictions. It's just worse all around now. According to one legal analysis by the Columbia Human Rights Law Review, FOSTA has not only forced many sex workers back to less safe environments such as bars and clubs and taken away access to methods for blacklisting especially dangerous clients, but it also has done absolutely nothing to stop sex trafficking, the thing it was written to do. In fact, since Sesta-Fosta has been enacted, it has resulted in exactly one federal prosecution. That's one, as in a single finger right up the ass, but not in a fun way, in a bad way. As noted by the Government Accountability Office, and this show, the last time we covered this, FOSTA is most likely making prosecution of sex trafficking more difficult due to many of these online platforms either shutting down or moving overseas, making it impossible to collect evidence or track payment systems. But shucks, and wait, did I say the sites were moving? I thought Sesta-Fosta at least got rid of those sex trafficking sites.
We have shut down nearly 90% of the online sex trafficking business and ad.
See? The government lady said so. Except it turns out that not long after FOSTA was passed, online sex trafficking sites rebounded to about 75% of their original figure. And so, wow, let's just take a moment to recap this. Sesta-Fosta not only made sex work more dangerous for consenting adults, failed to stop any non-consenting sex trafficking, but also didn't shut down sex trafficking sites. And so all it did was get rid of the good sites and leave the bad sites, eliminating any options for people looking for a sex worker that isn't being trafficked. Did sex trafficking write this law? I have to assume that since this obvious disaster, many lawmakers have publicly apologized and are now working to reverse the... what's that? Right. I suppose you want to know what the spider said, but then again, you probably already know. It turns out that the Senate actually is doubling down on their weird make-believe strategy for fighting sex predators, and are now creating something called the Earn It Act, something that Congress has been kicking around for a while now. And much like Sesta-Fosta, this plan sounds oh so very on the side of good that it's hard to imagine a problem with it, until you actually read the thing. The Earn It Act claims to help prevent sexual abuse of children on the internet. This is obviously a good goal, the same way wanting to stop sex trafficking is a good goal. But the way the Earn It Act proposes to do this is to take away very long-standing protections for tech companies under the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Those protections state, quote, "No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider." Basically, if someone harasses a person on Twitter, Section 230 prevents that person from suing Twitter directly. Now, that's a whole other debate about whether or not we need to hold sites like Twitter to higher standards. But what the Earn It Act specifically does is require major social media sites to, as the name implies, earn those protections by proving they are combating child sexual exploitation. And that sounds okay, right? Except the way they would prove this is by following a set guide laid out by a yet-to-be-compiled commission of 16 lawmakers. And hey, here's a question. Who will be on that commission? Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but lately there's a whole group of extremely bigoted people who have decided that any and all mention of being gay constitutes as child grooming. And so you see exactly why a lot of people are very worried about the direction this is going. On top of the clear implications of passing a law that could make it illegal to post about LGBTQ issues, this would also be an act on encryption services, as these websites would undoubtedly need to provide law enforcement access to private messages. You can already see the future here, can't you? If passed, this law will make the internet less safe for LGBTQ people, chip away at our online privacy, and most likely do absolutely nothing to actually stop child pornography. This is on top of Sesta-Fosta. And oh boy, hey, remember that whole thing where the Supreme Court eliminated Roe v. Wade and certain states are now quickly taking away women's rights to abortions and contraception in what is a clear attack by religious fanatics to force their beliefs on the rest of the country? And how more than ever we need online resources to help women who are now trapped in these extremely backward states? Well, guess what these online online laws can easily lead to. Now that Roe is overturned, there's literally nothing to stop the forced pregnancy politicians from introducing some five-star dick-brained law forcing online services to ban all mentions of abortion access for people in certain states. It's hauntingly possible. Here's what it all comes down to. Anyone who has even a fraction of a clue can tell you that sex work, much like abortion, should just be available. Studies like this one show that laws criminalizing sex work ultimately do extensive harm. On the flip side, online services such as Craigslist's erotic section have led to noticeable decreases in violence against sex workers. According to that study, Craigslist actually reduced the female homicide rate by 17.4%. This isn't like hard. And what it comes down to is that any law meant to ban or eliminate something terrible like sex trafficking or child pornography that uses sweeping censorship measures ultimately takes that terrible thing and simply moves it into the shadows where law enforcement can't get to it, while in turn banning completely innocent things. And maybe that's what they want. Maybe they just don't like normalizing sex work or LGBTQ people and see this as a win-win. Even if it doesn't do the thing they said it would do. It allows them to punish the people they simply don't like, you know? They don't actually care about the innocent people it'll harm, just like they don't care about the children who are now forced to carry pregnancies if they are raped. Luckily, there are people who do care about such things. The Hacking/Hustling Collective is a group formed in response to measures such as sesta-fosta. It is run by both researchers and sex workers looking to get accurate data on the occupation. Because one of the more frustrating things about the situation is that we really don't have any good data, because more often than not, that data is collected by people like law enforcement or others who don't fully understand what it means to be a sex worker, and the nuance between people doing the job consensually and people who are there against their will. In fact, some of the information we've relayed to you has come from their research. Meanwhile, a handful of representatives have introduced the Safe Sex Workers Study Act, which would direct the Department of Health and Human Services to conduct the first federal study on the impacts of sesta-fosta. So, progress. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but we are seeing a notable change in both the public perception of sex work and, more incredibly, some politicians' efforts to accurately study it. That's good. I mean, unless you remember that we're talking about one of the oldest professions ever, because on that scale, it's pretty amazing we're still stigmatizing it. Like, imagine if sex work was like any other occupation, just readily available, and how much safer that would be for everyone, and how, by doing that, it would draw a very clear line between sex work and sex trafficking. I'm sure there's more nuance here and problems we're not discussing, and like, I don't know if we need a sex kiosk at Walmart or anything like that, or wait, is that what we want? The way they have like eyeglass huts at the mall, but for little dens at the mall, or I guess it would be online now. Damn internet, ruining huts. Where am I? What were we talking about? My thoughts cry. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.